People are still joining in. I'll be just waiting. We'll be just waiting for next 1 minute or so. I think in the next 1 minute, most of the people would have joined, and then we'll properly begin. Right, I think we can start. Hello and welcome to today's session. Creativity is Employability. I'm your host, Rupesh Sinha. I am Deputy Director, Admissions and Marketing at Rishi University, India's first social impact university. As a creativity enthusiast, I have come across many takes on creativity, but the one I would like to mention is making the simple complicated is commonplace. Making the complicated simple, awesomely simple, that's creativity. Today, we have two great creative minds to guide us on this wonderful theme, creativity is employability. Please allow me to present a brief introduction of both the esteemed panelists. We have with us Professor Mike Knowles, Professor Emeritus, School of Creativity, Rishi University. Professor Mike has taught 3D design at Southfields College, London. He was elected a Fellow of Royal Society of Arts in 2003. He established a skills academy for the University of Arts, London. And Professor Mike has mentored hundreds of young scholars into careers within creative industries, both in India and the UK. We are also privileged to have Sonali Bhagwati, President DPA, Design Plus Architecture Private Limited. She is a graduate from CPT Ahmedabad. She's trained with renowned architect Bernard Cohn. She's a co-founder of Spazio Design Architecture in partnership with Swarab Dalal, and is currently president of DPA. And she has won several awards, and her works are being widely published. So I would now invite Professor Mike Knowles for the keynote, and subsequently Professor Mike will be engaging Ms. Sonali in an insightful conversation on design, creativity, and allied subjects. And later on, we'll open the session for the questions of the audience. And let us not forget that we also have Professor Manika Walia, Dean, School of Creativity, Rishi University, School of Creativity. And if there are any questions related to our programs, BDes, MDes, any such questions, Professor Manika Walia will be more than happy to take those questions. So I'm very excited to hand over it to Professor Mike. Welcome, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Rupesh. Lovely to be here. Absolutely delighted to do it. I'm in London at the moment. I'll be back in Delhi soon. Can't wait to get back. Absolutely wonderful. Miss Delhi terribly. But lovely to be in your living rooms, your offices, or whatever right now. Rupesh, one of the things that you said in your introduction, which is profoundly true, and that is the fact that simplicity is one of the most difficult things to manage. It's one of the most difficult things to handle and to do. And I think that there's one thing that you discover as you go on your course of developing your creativity as a practicing designer or whatever field of creativity that you're in. Simplicity is magic. It's absolutely magic. But I digress, and I'm going to digress a lot during this thing because I do that an awful lot. Okay. We'll come to the keynote after I've spoken to Sonali, but just a couple of points. Creativity is employability. Do you agree? Do you think that creativity is making your creativity is making you more employable and giving you more opportunity for the future? Or do you think that's rubbish? And it's very, very important. What's important about today's webinar, apart from the conversation with a brilliant and very successful creative with Sonali. Far more important than any ideas I've got is any ideas and questions that you've got. And one thing I've always done through my professional career as a mentor, and we certainly do at Rishi Hood University, is to encourage you to talk to us. Otherwise, we were not going to have a great time here. We're not going to have one of those sterile, this is A plus B and equals C and whatever. We're not going to do that. That really isn't worth it. You can pick up a book and read it, you learn more. I want an interaction. And as I said, I don't care how controversial you are. I don't care if you don't agree, tell us, because we want to hear that. We really genuinely want to hear that. Okay? Right, so we're on that track now, and let's hope that that comes off. So, first of all, I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to have fun, because I'm going to talk to somebody whom I have respected ever since I first went to India some little while ago. She was probably still a baby when I first went to India. So maybe I didn't, sort of know her then, but I've certainly known her over the years. And I have grown to like and respect Sonali as an amazing creative, amazing. And it goes deeper than just the world of, because she has designed some fabulous architecture and she has designed some fantastic interiors, because all great architects are great interiors people as well, good furniture designers as well. But because she's passionate about what she does. And she also cares about education. She cares about the growth of the creative industries. Okay, that's enough of me. Sonali, welcome. Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you this morning. Well, for me, it's morning.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Team Rishi Cool. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor and a pleasure.
How lovely. And I know you mean that from the heart, which is absolutely super. So, enough. Sonali, what brought you into the world of creativity? Just give us quite a deep background on how you became who you are.
I cannot really recollect when, because for all my cognitive life that I remember, I have always tended towards the creative fields. As a very young person, right from age maybe 10, 11, 12, I used to paint a lot. I had a great affinity for colors and different mediums. I used to go to Triveni and interact with a lot of the senior artists over there and watch them paint. And it really fascinated me. I sort of knew that I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want anything to do with economics, math, all those kind of things. They were my nemesis. I always wanted to do something in the field of art or fine arts or something which is related. And then when I finished school, I actually only applied for architecture. I applied at the Baroda school and I took a train and I went there and I did the exam. But unfortunately, the Baroda school, the exam was all to do with math and physics and chemistry, which was my nemesis. And I said, oh my God, I mean, this is going to kill me, So I really felt very frustrated and I felt a little sort of disconnected with the profession. But at the same time, since I was in Baroda, I decided to just take a bus. So I bought a 15 rupee bus ticket and I took a bus from Baroda to Ahmedabad. I landed up over here in Ahmedabad and I just walked into Sept. And when I walked in there, I said, oh my God, I've just got to be here. It was one of the most awe-inspiring campuses that I had ever been to in my 17 years, And I just went, I took a form, I fudged my parents' signature and I gave it in because my parents were traveling somewhere overseas and they had no clue what their daughter was up to. And I went and did the exam, and with God's grace, I got in. And rest is history. I just came back, packed my bags, and came back to Ahmedabad for good, you know. And it was one of the best things that happened to me, because the 5 years of architecture at CEPT were an absolute pleasure. It was not only just the campus, but to be under B.V. Doshi, who was, a mentor, a friend, a philosopher, someone we looked up to. The rest of the faculty, our peers, it was the whole shebang, you know. It was a wonderful, wonderful place to be. And the 5 years was a huge learning process, not only learning as a curriculum, but learning on an overall basis, learning from people who visited you, learning from, exchange students, learning from different people who came and gave lectures over there, your peers, your other institutions like NID. We used to go to IIM. It was actually, Ahmedabad was, I would say, a very stimulating environment, you know, for an architect. And I think it was a wonderful 5 years. So that's what got me into architecture. And of course, rest is history. I never looked back from there.
Let me just say that for all of you looking that you are going to go into the creative industries, which I hope is all of you, certainly if you want a successful life, just look at what's coming out from Sonali's face and from her persona. Look at the happiness, look at the joy, and understand her total involvement in a very magic and very wonderful world. I wonder how many people get that. I wonder how many doctors, lawyers, whatever, get that kind of joy from the industry that they are in. But Sonali, you touched on one thing, which is very important. The whole thing about there is a school of thought, it's changing dramatically, thank goodness, but that says if you want to do architecture, then you must be strong on maths, you must be strong on the sciences, so you must be strong on what most sort of like your parents or would probably say are the pucker subjects, none of this airy fairy stuff. How did your parents react to the fact that you were going to go into the world, the creative world?
You know, I come from a family where my father was a lawyer by profession. He was a judge at that time. And but I would say we are three sisters, and none of us really were compelled to do anything that he wanted. He actually pushed us. My parents pushed us to do exactly what we wanted. They said, follow your dreams and make them happen. Don't forget that there is no shortcut to hard work. Don't think that just by you're skirting hard work by getting into a design profession or a creative profession. It's equal amount of hard work if you want things to happen well and to happen successfully. So their approach was that whatever you choose to do, put in your 100% and do it really well. And that's where we all came from, you know. So I would say that my parents had no clue that I was going to go to Ahmedabad. They had no clue I was going away from home. They actually tempted me a lot to say that, you know, you can try for SPA Delhi so that you can stay at home and whatnot. But by the time the SPA exam was scheduled, which was about a month or so later than CEPT, I was completely sold on CEPT. I did not want to move at all. And that was it, you know. So, of course, I come from a very emancipated kind of a family who supports every decisions that we took. So they just supported me. They gave everything that I needed and helped me go forward in what I wanted to do.
No, that's absolutely wonderful. And you know, when I started in education in India, maybe 15, 20 years ago, the prejudice that I would come up when I set up a couple of schools, the prejudice that I found about, and I still see it in some of the students that I've mentored, parents saying, yeah, but should she really do all this creative stuff? Shouldn't he be a lawyer? Shouldn't he be this? As if it, because they're pucker. Whereas this, this other world, but it is changing. It is changing. Did you find that one of my daughters, my middle daughter, Jahan, she studied architecture at Central St. Martin's. She was good with maths and science, but they were not her favourites. She was very good on the creative side. And she found that pulled her away from architecture per se. So she's ended up, even though she's a practicing architect and interior architect and designs fabulous furniture. So when in your profession, your professional life, when you came across the things that would have needed a mathematical approach or a scientific approach, how did you manage?
Unfortunately, to get into architecture school, one needed to have the maths and the sciences as a background in school. So to me, that was my nemesis. I hated every minute of my grade 11 and 12, which was all to do with math and sciences. And I could never understand why we needed to do that. Yes, you need to know some few basic elementary things which are part and parcel of our everyday work and process, but you really don't need to study the math and sciences the way you are expected to. Because you see, eventually, when you get into the profession, you have people, you consult people to do their specialist jobs. You are not supposed to know these things. You are supposed to understand them. You're supposed to have an overall sort of macro level understanding of how things work, but you are not really expected to get into the nitty-gritties and the details, because that is the work of a specialist. When you come to structure, you are never designing a structure for your own buildings. You are always working with a structural designer. However, it's nice to know that, yes, overall a structure can do this or cannot do this, or what the pros and cons would be. So it's really a macro level understanding only that is required. And the fact that you have to do math and sciences in school is really, really outdated, according to me, because today everything is so specialized. It's no longer a mom and pop profession. It's a very specialized profession which encompasses many disciplines that need to get synthesized together to make a project happen. And that requires people with special skills and special backgrounds. So all you need to do is, you are like the ringmaster, the architect, and the visionary. And we have to bring in people of various professions to fill in the gaps and fill in the various sort of things that are required to make the overall project happen.
Yeah, I think, and again, you very cleverly brought us straight round to one of the core things that we'll be discussing today. If you look at a practice in the past, I remember when I first started in design and architecture, that I remember working on a huge drawing board, and with I didn't even have rapidiographs back there. We had pen and ink, or we used a lot of pencil with tracing paper. If I think about those days, and especially when I tried to do that stuff in India, and we're in a very hot room, and you're trying to draw with a pencil, and your hands are sweating, and your stuff's going all over the place. Completely different world, a completely different world. But of course, and this is the key point, all those things you're talking about there, the structural engineering, the costing, the graphic statics, the whatever, it's not going to be done by a human. The human will turn around and say, I want this and this and this and this to the computer, and the computer, the AI, and this will happen. And all those youngsters listening to this now, this was where you're going to be in your office. There'll be you, and there'll be the finance perhaps director or this and that, but you will have 1, 2, 10 computers or robots working with you who will do the nitty-gritty, who will do the tasks, which will include, as I said, the engineering or whatever. And the big difference is that the computer, the robot, will do it quicker than you, will do it cheaper than you, and do it more accurately than you. They don't make mistakes. But the one thing you will never get from AI, from a robot, you couldn't go to your robot and say, okay, fine, thank you for all the information you've given me. Now, you go off and design something. The robot wouldn't know where to start. And this comes back to our theme, our key theme, that it's creativity. It's that human magic that makes you employable, that makes you special. And again, that's why at the beginning of this, I've encouraged all of you that are a part of this webinar to give us your ideas. Tell us what you think, because that's the magic of being a human being. It's your individual psyche, it's your individual spirit, whatever you want to call it. But that's exactly what it is. With these changes, Sonali, I mean, so we were talking about the changing of the dynamics of the design industry. Can you enlighten us a little bit more on that yourself? How are the dynamics changing?
First of all, let's say when I started my practice, which was like 30 years ago, we were really restricted in terms of what was available and what you worked within, It was like a small, narrow path that you were going on. But in the 90s, the world started changing. World change, it opened up, India opened up, the world became smaller for us, and access to information systems and everything else became a different story altogether. So that was the time when actually I would say that hopes, aspirations, and expectations of the clients as well as the architects started changing. Things that we would earlier, as students used to think that, oh, that's wonderful, but that's there. That's not here. We are in India and we can only do that. Now that perception started changing completely. And today we are at a situation where there is no difference. We are on the same platform as anywhere else in the world. We have access to the same technology, the same scale of projects. What has essentially changed a lot is also the scale of projects. Earlier, we were looking at projects which are of a limited scale, of a limited size. Today, we are looking at mega projects. We are looking at, using a lot of technology in every aspect of our buildings, every aspect of our interiors, whether it is in a manufacturing or application-based systems. So these are the kind of changes that have happened. Also, what is really happening is that today, a building or a project or even an interior is no longer just a few things. Today, it is a combination of multiple things that need to be looked at, and that's when I say the specialists come in. We are looking at graphics. Let's say we're talking about interiors. Graphics, art, and is become a very, very important aspect. The kind of materials that we are using. Now, these materials could be local, they could be imported, they could be part imported, part local. There's a variety of things that can happen. Concepts of kind of spaces that we want, that has become different, And people today do not hesitate in really, which is very nice, exploring what could be done. I mean, actually today the limits of your mind have really expanded. You are able to really think out of the box and not put any limits to creativity if you want it that way. And that is enabled by opening up, by import of technology, import of knowledge, sharing of knowledge, sharing of communication, a variety of things, and all these various aspects, whether it is technology, whether it is art, whether it is materials, whether it is colors, textures, form, all these things sort of come in and help us create, new things, different things. And not everything it may be to do with functionality. It may have functionality, but then we tend to go beyond that to create what we call the visual satisfaction, the visual delights that are equally important in creating interesting architecture, interesting spaces, interesting forms, interesting products. And I would extend this concept to not only architecture, as I said, it's interior, it's materials, it's furniture, it's styling, it's industrial, design, product design, every aspect, fashion design. I'm extending this to every aspect of design because the core of this is creativity. It just now is in your mind how much forward you can go and where you want to stop. There is no limits to holding you back, which was there earlier. But today, thanks to where the things are, our limits have expanded. And there is really, I would say it's limitless now.
It's incredibly exciting. It's lovely to hear you talk like that. And I know you enjoy it to the fullest. I really know that. I mean, we'll chat with the students a little bit in a second, but this is where AI, the people go on about AI saying, oh my God, they're going to take my job. I'm going to work for robots. Well, that's possible. A lot of people, well, 80% of people will work for robots, but 20% of the really successful people, the robots will work for them.
Yes, I was actually going to say that it's not that you're going to work for the robots. The robots are going to work for you because they are going to do things which are the mechanical things, the nitty-gritties, things which can be done fast, effectively, but you are going to be on top of them because you are going to be the thinker. You're going to be, let's say, the person who orchestrates the whole story.
Yeah, I think, that's wonderful. I mean, I have to admit it. My years of being an interior architect, furniture designer, I always say, oh God, architects, they're so full of themselves. You know what it's like. There's always that sort of, there's always that little bit of a thing going on. But architecture is the senior service within the creative industries. There's no two ways about it. And as you said, if you are a brilliant architect, which of course you are, and you are a brilliantly creative person, there's no boundaries. So, Preeti, when my wife is also an interior architect, she's designing a restaurant. She wants to do the menu. She wants to help with what the guys wear. She will do the lighting, but then she'll work on the chairs and make sure they're perfect. It's absolutely amazing. But the other thing that this has done, and we touched on that on a little chat ourselves, the whole thing then becomes the changing of society, doesn't it? When you get your spaces right, then when you walk into an ugly space, it destroys you. It destroys your creativity. It destroys your thinking. When you walk into a beautiful space, it opens up your thinking. I mean, what's your take on that?
You're absolutely right, Mike, because creativity and a good space is, according to me, design can impact social behavior. And one of the case in points is my coming into SEPT. When I walked into SEPT Ahmedabad, it was the most awe-inspiring experience. And as a 17-year-old with zero knowledge of architecture or anything around that, if that could inspire me, I think it speaks volumes that a good space can make or break the human behavior.
I mean, it's everything. It's the ownership of space, isn't it? Again, that's why we're encouraging anybody, all of you students joining us today, we're encouraging you to talk to us. To take, the minute you take ownership of a topic, of a subject, is the minute that you have success. It really is. When you're helping a youngster become a hardworking and successful creative, the first thing I always do with youngsters is I make sure, and even if I have to orchestrate it ever so slightly, I make sure they do something successful. I was been working with a highly creative young lad here in London, working out his creative career, and massively creative, not too much interested in the maths and things like that. And one of his recent projects was creating a spoon. And I think you know who I'm talking about. and when that young person made this beautiful piece, changed the outlook. You know, okay, you may not be able to sort of, you may not be able to do the multiple mathematics and you may not be able to, sort of spell even. I'm dyslexic, and a great deal of creatives are dyslexic. But you have the magic of the creativity inside you. And that's the thing that really, really counts.
Right. Professor Mike, there are some questions. There are some questions lined up. Whenever you'll ask, I'll start sharing the questions that audience are putting in. Okay, let me just one final thing then to Sonali, if she doesn't mind. So Sonali, would you say that creativity is employability?
Mike, I feel creativity is really at the top of the pyramid. So if you are creative, you have the ability to do whatever it takes, whatever is required, whether it is orchestrating a string of robots to do your work, and you think because you are at the top of the pyramid, so whether it is people that you're dealing with, AI that you're dealing with, instruments that you're dealing with, systems you're dealing with, you have the ability to extract what is required from each person, aspect, or machine. So unless you are creative, you will never be at the top of the pyramid. You will be somewhere in the middle. And that's not what we are looking for, So it's only when you're at the top that your employability is unquestioned.
Perfect.
So that's where I come from. I mean, there is no replacing that. Everyone at the middle rungs and the bottom rungs is replaceable. But nobody can think, because that's where you are coming from, the exploratory mind, the thought process, the will and the focus to go beyond and create and try and think out of the box. That's where you are. That's why you are at the top. Nobody else can do that for you. And then you direct others to do various aspects of that process that's required to make what you want, your vision, happen. The vision is in your head. And that's where the creative mind comes in. The others are the doers and you are the thinker.
That's exactly the point. I mean, and I'm going to open it up in a minute, so absolutely beautiful. And we didn't rehearse this. We didn't say, well, we want you to say this. And it comes from your heart and it comes from the absolute fact. But, one of the one of the buzzword around the world at the moment is innovation. So an article I was reading in the UK Times a couple of weeks back said, any nation that is not innovative will fail. And it really is as serious as that. And yet, in my own country, in the UK, the government is not investing in creative education, or they've cut back on their investment, which is madness, because where does innovation come from? Innovation comes from the creative mind. And it's holding that. There was research that was done by NASA a couple of decades ago, looking at creativity, because creativity is everything for NASA, everything. ideas. So they looked at creativity and they did all this study, and they found that youngsters at the age of 5 are 98% creative. Then we take them, we drag them, and we put them in the education system in most countries in the world that was cobbled together at the time of the Industrial Revolution, because the powers, the people in power wanted humans to do what they tell them to do. So we want you to be a coal miner, so you can go down, give us our coal so that we can get whatever, but you can die of lung disease. Or we want you to be a soldier because we want you to go and colonize countries. We don't mind if you get shot. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be political, but that's one of those things. So we've drained. Creativity has come out, and this, as I say, it's all around the world, majority of places. So when a youngster is 12, their creativity has come down to 30%.
Oh my God.
And when that youngster becomes, is 18, like most of you, looking for your future career, the time you need the most ideas, your creativity levels are 12%. And that's abuse. That's an absolute abuse. And that's why at Rishihood, the first school that we put together was not a school of design, even though design is a big part of what we do. But that creativity is the Rishihood School of Creativity. And I've seen it with hundreds, literally hundreds, probably thousands of youngsters, where they've gone from being people with no ideas to being great ideas to become successful. Thanks, Sonali, that was absolutely magic. We'll come on to some questions in a second, but I just want to give you some bullet points then, okay? In your world, young people, AI is king. Well, that's probably the wrong word. AI is important, okay? It's going to affect your life dramatically. 80% of tasks that are carried out as a doctor, a lawyer, a surgeon, as a pilot or whatever will be done by AI, 80%. The other 20% will be done with people with ideas, because AI is powerful, but it's not creative, does not have new ideas. So the logic comes that if you actually want to be successful, if you want to, sorry to be so coarse, but if you want to drive your Ferrari and live in a fantastic place, your creativity is vital for it to you, absolutely vital. What creative humans create is the food that robots feed on. And unless we give them that food, then they ain't going to go anywhere. Nothing's going to happen. So again, Sonali, thank you. And now, Rupesh, can we open this up to the audience?
Yeah. Sure, sir. And we have got an array of questions. Interestingly, we have got questions from students as well as educators. So I'll share both, and probably I'll request that probably you can keep our answers as pithy as possible, so that we can take up as many questions as possible. I'm sure that's going to be difficult for like people like you with so many ideas and information, but we'll try to do that. So the first question I'll take, it's from a student. She says, my name is Jhalak. I'm 15 years old. I like creativity and trying different mediums. I don't know which stream I have to choose in class 11 and what to do in future.
Shall I answer that, Sonali?
Yes, please.
You see, again, you see what you start doing when you do say things like that. What stream should I take? You start putting people into funnels. It's like, you know, so if you do your maths, do your science, do anything to do with the arts. Languages are wonderful. Sing, paint, draw, make things. Making is essential. Making is essential. It's the beginnings. It's the foundation. Pottery. Pottery is one of the most beautiful media in the world to bring through your creative ideas. So, but then do your own research and see, you know, choose your college. Always, you know, from the age of 15, you should be writing a thing called an SOP, a statement of purpose. And you need to sit down and say, I want to do this. I want to be. And then what you write, and you keep updating that SOP, it will show you where your heart is going. And that will tell you what you should be studying. But nobody should be denied the opportunity to go into a school of creativity. Dyslexic, people that with all sorts of things, you know, it really doesn't make any difference. It's the creativity is completely different things. Children with Asperger's, all sorts of bits and pieces. So and talk, you know, terribly important. If you're going to be a person who mentors young creatives, be a person who listens and literally listens, doesn't just take in the information and treats it, you know, whatever. You are important to us as individuals. We need to understand you. So you know, if anybody, you can, I'm sure you can get my email address at the end of this. Write to me, and I will definitely reply to you. Thank you for the question.
Right. Thank you, sir. And before I take the next question, I'll just would like to run a poll here, and in that we have some very basic question. Yeah, I think all you have to do, all the participants, you have to just tell us that what is the level of education that you are in currently, so that we'll get a good idea of what the crowd is right now. And I would also like to tell you that we are planning to make it a series. So in case you are interested in lining up for the further editions of this series, you may please message yes at a number which will be showed displayed in the chat a while from now, so that you know, we can get in touch with you, keep you informed about the further sessions. Right. I think still people please feel free to answer. Still there are a lot of people who have not yet answered. We can quickly go through this so that we can continue with the questions and answers, because that's also very, very vital. It will just take a second to just tick it and okay. Right. I think I'm going to end it now. Fair enough. Fair enough. That's nice. Thanks for your responses. And now we can continue with the questions, sir. So there's a very interesting question asked by Mr. Sanchit Roy. Just a moment. I just question slipped slightly. Yeah, Mr. Sanjay Roy. He says, I'm not such good in paintings, but I'm very much fascinated by the automobile designing. Is it possible for me to go for designing even when I'm not much good in arts?
I'll take that. You know, I'm an architect, and for an architect, our language is drawing. Anything that is in our mind needs to be expressed through a drawing. That is our language. However, I do not profess to be good at sketching. I do not profess to be good at art. I am not into fine arts in its literal sense. What is important is that in a creative profession or in a creative field, whatever is in your mind, you need to find a way to express it, because it's not going to be about words. It's not going to be about words and writing or speaking. It's only through a medium of illustration. And that illustration doesn't have to be fine art or sketching. That illustration can be any means. So you have to find a way to express yourself, and it need not be restricted to sketching or art in its true literal sense.
Absolutely brilliant and so true. Let me just again this morning reading the Times, and there was a quote there from Picasso, the famous artist. Can't get much more famous than Picasso. And Picasso said, every child is an artist, but they stop because we don't let them be. That's where the system has let you down terribly. Even my sketching is not what it used to be. It's not whatever. There are no boundaries. You are not tied up as a creative. And again, as Sonali quite rightfully said, choose your medium. Yeah. Get some paper, tear it up, do some papier-mâché. Get a piece of clay. Clay is the best thing ever. Yeah, just be careful. Don't do it on the dining table. Otherwise, Mum will beat you. Yeah, well, not beat you, but she'll scold you. Sorry, Rupesh.
Yeah, there's an interesting one question from educator side, Mr. Rakesh Kumar Chaudhary. He says, a very good evening to all. I'm an educator and faced an issue regarding students' creativity. They come in class and ask how they can get job easy. And they're more focused toward placements, but not interested in fundamental design process. What can I do for motivating them through learning first and then think about job?
Do you want to do that tonight? Okay, then. Well, it comes back to this point again, isn't it? You know, it is you as an educator, part of your job is to untangle the knots that the system has put in their head. And that, seriously, if you're told you're no good at something, then you're no good at it. It's as simple as that. You have to stop that happening. And you have to encourage youngsters to see, like, this whole thing about being creative. It's the most important asset that we have. And saying to them, look, build up your creativity. There's lots of programs that we've developed at Rishihood and I've written about, where it's so easy to get to, after losing, sort of 60%, 80% of your creativity, it's so easy to put it back in there. It seriously is. It's not difficult because you're just putting back what's been taken out. You're not creating anything new in that sort of. So just say to the youngster, get your ideas together. Yeah, Richard Branson, all those kind of bits and pieces. People with ideas, write them down, do it. The world is your oyster. Yeah, unless you happen to be a vegetarian, of course. But but seriously, there is nothing for you as a human that is beyond you. There is nothing.
And I'll add to that if you know what you want and you go for it, you will find the right placement no matter what.
Absolutely. Jobs are in abundance for when people, jobs are people that want to do, people that are helpful. They may not know how to do. They may not know exactly what to do when they first start. But if somebody comes along and says, I want to, yeah, I want to do this. It's in my heart. I want to do it. You'll get the job. You will get the job.
True.
Yeah. It's what's inside you.
Right. Professor Mike, I read somewhere the creative adult is the child who survived. And the next question is related to that. This Komal Jan, she asked, how do you know how creative you are? How do you understand and develop the creativity?
Oh. Sonali?
I don't think there is a measure of creativity. It's just what makes you happy. That is the most important thing. Whatever you do, if it's giving you joy, it's making you happy, that's where you ought to be. So there is no benchmark, no measures that this is creative and this is not. I'll give you an example. My father was a judge and he was obviously very much within a system. But to me, he was extremely creative because he felt that the judicial system was constricting. It was too regimented. And he brought in reforms by which I would say he was the architect of these reforms. It was his creative mind that molded the law to help the poor to bring in public interest litigation. So he was creative in his field. That was his creativity, and that's what gave him pleasure. It gave him happiness. It gave him focus, and he went all out for it. So creativity is not something which is only in design or X or Y or Z. Creativity is a general term. Creativity can be in any field, and there is no definition or benchmark to say, am I creative? No, everyone is creative. It is just you need to follow what your dreams are and take it forward. And that's where your creativity will come. It may be in the field of economics, it can be in the field of art, it can be in the field of graphics, it can be in any field. But creativity is taking forward your mind in whatever field that you are inclined towards, what makes you happy.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. But on the subject of can you rebuild it, and it is, you can rebuild it. There's a whole lot of simple programs. Let me give them to you, because or a taste of them. And again, email me, and we'll talk about it. Things like ways of seeing. The vast majority of people see about 30% of what's actually in front of them. They don't see beyond the obvious. And one little thing you can do there, get together with a group of your friends or with your parents and get everybody to close their eyes and draw, but to think of a piece of wood being cut. That's all it is, just a piece of wood, don't be specific, being cut. And then they say, right, now write down what you saw, draw what you saw if you can. You will be surprised of the variation in answers. And I've seen youngsters say, I saw a black box on a white background and it just fell in half. All the way through, and this is usually girls that do this, is they say, I saw a forest, I saw trees, I saw birds in the forest, I could hear the rustling of the leaves, I could hear the birds, and then somebody came along with a saw and cut the trees down. And one young girl, it brought me to tears actually. I heard the trees cry. And then you say to them, do you smell anything? Yeah, I could smell the sap from the wood. You can take your mind and you can take it from basic all the way through to positive. Another little one, just another little thing that we do, because this comes back to what Rupesh said at the beginning, simplicity. When it comes to problem solving, you've all seen mind maps. There's a green line here, red line there, yellow line there, all over the place, very pretty. Yeah, it looks like a tube map. But all I do with youngsters is to build up their creativity and say, I throw them a piece of string that's been knotted. And I say, sit there, close your eyes and undo the knots. Don't break anything, whatever, just keep doing it. And that's process. Because once you do it and you take the time to undo one knot, when the first knot's gone, then the rest of the knots follow. There are little things, and these programs, I've written them down. If anybody writes to me, I can sort things out for them. But it's, it is not difficult. It is not difficult. Sorry.
Right. That was so wonderful, so beautiful. Like it was like I also started imagining as you were explaining. That was so vivid. I'm sorry, I'll not be able to take a lot of questions. It's so heartening to see a lot of involvement from the audience. But I think everybody understands that because of paucity of time, we'll not be able to take all the questions. But Sonali ma'am, there's a question specifically asked to you, and I think we can end on probably this note. The question reads, question for Sonali ma'am. Have you ever created something that you didn't like, but it was appreciated by the public? How did you handle the different perspective?
I feel that you may agree with a client, you may not agree with a client, but eventually, being a professional, you have to respect what the client wants. But the trick is that whatever the client wants, how do you synthesize it? How do you put together those things into a design solution which doesn't make you unhappy? And I think that's where a good or a conscientious architect comes into picture. There are different strokes for different folks. Everybody has different thoughts, different hopes, aspirations, whatever. So as an architect, we are not creating a painting where I do what I want and you take it or you leave it. I am actually designing for specific people, for specific requirements and their own hopes and aspirations. And you have to fulfill them. However, You have to create solutions which sort of draw them out towards what you feel is the right thing to do without taking away from their base idea. And I don't think there is anything where I can say that it's something which I don't like, but it's appreciated, because eventually I have always drawn them out enough and synthesized it into something which I felt was good enough, which I felt my conscience accepted it before I gave it to them, or before it got created into a built form. So I think that's the trick. People want different things, but as an architect, it's our duty to hold their hand and bring them and synthesize it into something which we feel is acceptable from our point of view as well.
Right.
That's absolutely wonderful. I mean, I can't. This is within our profession. I mean, even though it's 99.9% happy, some things happen that are a little bit irksome. So the amount of times, and I'm sure Sonali's been there, and I certainly have, dozens and dozens of times that you go to the opening of a project, and you walk around. You've been the key architect, you've been the key designer, and you walk around. You're with the client, and then everybody loves it. And suddenly the client turns around and says, yes, so I said, let's do this. Yes, I said, let's do this. Because that's what happens. So what happens if somebody who's really talented knows how to win the hearts of their audience? I remember one classic one with somebody incredibly high profile in the entertainment world, and lovely, lovely person, still an amazing friend. But when we were doing her house, it was, I mean, the choices were abysmal at the beginning, and they ended up magic. So we completely changed her mind, but she still owned it at the end of it. And that's part and parcel of your skill as a creative. It really is. It's a joy, absolute joy.
Right. So we are saying that creativity skills are also involve creativity in behavior, behavioral skills and creativity skills.
Absolutely.
Okay. Finally, yeah. So finally, we have one specific question for Professor Manika Walia, Dean, School of Creativity. Ma'am, the question is that Rishi Hood calls itself a social impact university. What do you think is the correlation between social impact on one hand and creativity and design on the other hand?
I thank you for this, though I was putting all the answers in the question and answers and listening to Mike and Sonali. Lovely discussion. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Sonali, for this. I'm sure the audience are completely intrigued, and they have this new, perspective towards the creative education and the creative domain. So thank you once again. So now, as we say that School of Creativity and Rishi Hood University, we are a social impact university. So let me tell you, and this is what I was going through question and answers, majority of the students and the educators here, anything, if it is creative, what is creativity? I'm sure both the two experts have made you understand. Nothing moves, trust me, nothing moves, whether you are sitting in a boardroom or you are doing some collaborative work, you are talking, you are making something, you are in the kitchen, you are writing, you are reading a book, you are, just going for a stroll. Nothing moves without creativity. So now, how social impact? Now, creativity, design, visual arts, all these areas, they help you towards creating a social impact, because as Mike has rightly said, the design process, it's a very human-centric process. We talk of empathy, right? So everything when we say, we are talking about keeping the human in the core, in the center. So when you are talking about keeping human in the center, you are bound to create a social impact, because you know what you are doing, you can't go wrong. So creative entrepreneurs, anything, whether you talk of entrepreneurship, you talk of innovation, the idea comes from a creative mind, right? So whenever you are in a crisis, we say we innovate. How do we innovate? Because our brain starts working in a creative direction, and thereby, you try to get into a social impact. You try to create that change, which is a much required change. Right. So I think that is how, creativity yields and makes you more empathetic towards the whole scenario.
Excellent, excellent.
Right. So I think on this note, we will wind up this very informative and enlightening event, which I think did a total justice to the theme. Creativity is employability, and I would first request all the audiences to have a look at the chat, because some important links have been shared there, because a lot of questions have remained unanswered. So it will make a lot of sense for you to register at this link to subsequently attend a counseling session wherein representatives and experts from our School of Creativity will be there to answer your questions at length, right? So that you don't have to feel that have that missing out feeling. You will definitely get answers to your queries. So please take note of that and take time to register there. Also, if you want to be a part of subsequent sessions, a number has been shared. You can simply message yes at that number. So we'll make sure that we keep coming back to you with the information about the subsequent sessions. And now I would like to thank Professor Mike Knowles, Sonali ma'am, and Monica Valia ma'am for giving their precious time and enlightening this wonderful crowd. I also like to thank all the audiences, and I'm sure that you would be definitely thoroughly enlightened and properly informed. And I'm sure that it helps you in the career planning process that you are embarking on. Thank you very much.